He woke to a sterile white ceiling and glowing blue lines, a captured specimen in an alien arena built for entertainment, not mercy. The Overseer's voice was chillingly formal as he declared Ethan's fate, to fight for the galaxy's amusement. But when they gave him an energy blade and sent him against the Krell Devastator, they didn't expect a human to rewrite their rules. The cold metal pressed against his neck first, a circular band that hummed with contained energy. Then came the sterile white ceiling overhead, its geometric blue lines glowing with soft light. Ethan Drake tried to sit up, but restraints held him flat against the examination table. His muscles strained against unseen bonds, testing their limits. 4 figures stood around him, their forms obscured by pristine white uniforms and reflective face shields. Their movements were precise, clinical, devoid of any emotional quality. One produced a scanner that emitted a pale green beam across Ethan's torso. The device beeped softly, recording data he couldn't comprehend. The room carried the scent of ozone and antiseptic, so strong it made his eyes water. He noticed the walls were seamless, without visible doors or windows, just more of that glowing blue circuitry tracing patterns in the smooth surface. His last memory was of Earth, of his apartment, of falling asleep watching news reports about strange atmospheric phenomena. Now this. A voice cut through the silence, mechanical and toneless. Specimen 734 confirmed viable. Neural patterns within acceptable parameters for entertainment protocols. The words came from nowhere and everywhere at once, echoing slightly in the sterile space. Ethan tried to speak, to demand answers, but his throat produced only a dry rasp. The collar around his neck vibrated warningly, a low buzz that traveled through his spine. When he attempted to turn his head toward the sound source, the vibration intensified into a sharp jolt that made his teeth ache. One of the white uniformed figures approached with an injector. Ethan struggled instinctively, his body tensing against the restraints. The collar responded immediately, delivering a pulse of energy that locked every muscle in agony. For 3 heartbeats he couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only experience the raw neurological feedback screaming through his nervous system. The pain receded as suddenly as it came, leaving behind a phantom ache in his joints. The figure administered the injection without hesitation, the needle finding his jugular with practiced efficiency. Cold fluid spread through his veins, carrying with it a strange clarity. He understood then, the clinical detachment of his captors, the designed responses of the technology, the complete absence of explanation or negotiation. This wasn't interrogation or imprisonment in any sense he understood from Earth. He was inventory, a resource acquired for specific use. The Overseer's voice returned, flat and definitive. You will provide entertainment for the Dominion. Compliance yields survival. Resistance yields termination. The words hung in the air, their finality absolute. Ethan's fingers curled against the table surface, seeking purchase where none existed. The reality settled into his bones, colder than the metal against his skin. His identity as a free human being meant nothing here. He was property now, a living component in someone else's spectacle. He watched the blue lines on the ceiling pulse in rhythmic patterns, like a heartbeat counting down to some unknown event. His own heart beat faster in response, but his face remained still, his breathing controlled. The first lesson had been administered, and he had learned it well. They owned his body, but the mind behind his eyes began calculating survival from that moment forward. The collar's hum never stopped. It vibrated against Ethan's throat with a subtle, constant frequency, a reminder that resistance meant immediate consequences. They transferred him to a holding block, his feet dragging across polished floors that reflected the ceiling's sterile light. Guards in matte black armor flanked him, their movements synchronized, weapons held at ready positions. None spoke, none needed to. His cell was a transparent cube among hundreds arranged in perfect rows that stretched into hazy distance. The walls felt like hardened air, yielding slightly under pressure but impossible to break. When he pressed both palms against one surface, testing its give, the collar delivered a sharp jolt that locked his elbows and dropped him to his knees. Pain flooded his nervous system, white-hot and precise. It lasted exactly 5 seconds, then vanished completely, leaving no lasting damage but perfect memory. He learned the patterns quickly. The surveillance fields tracked movement, heart rate, even pupil dilation. Attempting to communicate with other prisoners through gestures earned another correction, this one shorter but more intense. The man in the adjacent cube had tried to scratch markings on his wall. He now sat motionless in one corner, eyes fixed on nothing. Systems designed this way break individuality through predictable punishment. They replace cooperation with isolated fear. Meals arrived through slots in the floor at precise intervals. Nutritional paste in neutral colors, water in measured amounts. No utensils, no variation. The taste was intentionally bland, providing sustenance without pleasure. Eating became mechanical, another controlled function. Showers were sonic cycles that cleaned without water, lasting exactly 90 seconds. The schedule never changed. Wake, eat, exercise, period, rest, repeat. Each phase marked by tone sequences that bypassed conscious choice. Ethan watched how other captives adapted. Some fought the system until they broke. Others retreated inward, becoming passive shells. A few, like him, observed everything. He noted guard rotation patterns, the slight delay between attempted violation and correction, the way the surveillance fields flickered during shift changes. Small things, meaningful things. During exercise periods, he moved through combat drills from his military training. Not the flashy techniques, but fundamentals. Footwork, balance, breathing control. The system allowed this, even seemed to encourage physical readiness. But when he practiced strikes against the air, the collar monitored his exertion levels, his adrenaline spikes, his combat efficiency. They were studying him even as he prepared to survive them. The psychological pressure was constant. Always being watched, always being measured. No privacy, not even in bodily functions. The transparent walls meant every captive could see every other, but communication remained impossible. A cruel design that created the illusion of community, while ensuring absolute isolation. It made resistance a solitary calculation against overwhelming systems. Ethan began treating each day as training. He measured his responses, controlled his breathing during corrections, learned to anticipate the pain rather than fear it. The collar became not just a restraint, but a teacher. Its reactions taught him about Dominion technology, about their thresholds for punishment, about what they valued in their specimens. Survival meant understanding the rules completely before attempting to bend them. He noticed small vulnerabilities. The surveillance fields took milliseconds to recalibrate when multiple incidents occurred simultaneously. The guard's armor had joint gaps that might be exploited. The nutritional paste, while bland, could be shaped into crude tools if allowed to dry. These observations became his first weapons. The control mechanisms were perfect, but the organisms operating them were not. That difference became his focus. Every system has weaknesses, even those designed to be flawless. The trick was finding them without getting caught looking. The holding block stretched a kilometer in every direction, a geometric prison of glowing cubes suspended in darkness. Each transparent cell contained a living being, all visible to one another yet completely isolated. Ethan's cube offered a view of hundreds of other captives, different species, different physiologies, all sharing the same silent fate. He could see an insectoid creature grooming its mandibles 3 rows down, a scaled humanoid performing slow stretching routines, a furry mammal-like being curled in defensive posture. Their eyes occasionally met across the void, but no communication passed between them. The design was brutally efficient. Community teased but never realized. Solidarity visually available but physically impossible. Days followed identical patterns marked by chemical lights shifting through color spectra. Blue for wake cycle, green for meals, amber for exercise, red for rest. Meals arrived through floor slots, nutritional paste in neutral tones, water in measured portions. The paste had the consistency of thick clay and left a metallic aftertaste. During exercise periods, the cube walls retracted slightly, allowing more movement space while maintaining containment fields. Some prisoners exercised vigorously, others moved listlessly. A few remained perfectly still. The surveillance fields tracked everything: heart rates, muscle engagement, even stress hormones in the air. Performance metrics invisible but constantly recorded. Ethan used the exercise periods for combat drills. He practiced footwork patterns from military training, shadowboxing combinations, evasion maneuvers. His movements were economical, designed to build muscle memory without exhausting himself. He studied other prisoners' techniques, the way the insectoid creature used its multiple limbs for balance, how the scaled humanoid leveraged its tail for momentum, the mammalian being's low center of gravity. These observations became data points filed away. The constant visibility created performance anxiety in many captives. They either showed off or withdrew completely. Ethan remained focused on practical improvement, treating each session as preparation for what he knew was coming. Between cycles, he practiced situational awareness. He tracked guard patrol patterns along the catwalks above, noting their inspection routines and response times. He observed how the surveillance fields flickered during shift changes, a 3-second window when monitoring intensity decreased slightly. He cataloged which prisoners received better rations or medical attention, noting that combat readiness seemed to yield small privileges. The psychological pressure was constant, always being watched, always being measured against undefined standards. Some captives broke under this, developing repetitive behaviors or catatonic states. Others became performative, treating their captivity as audience preparation. Ethan maintained discipline through routine. Wake, eat, train, observe, rest. He measured his progress by tangible metrics. How long he could hold certain stances, how quickly he could complete movement patterns, how accurately he could predict guard rotations. The despair that gripped many prisoners became fuel for his preparation. Each day in the holding block was a classroom where he learned about his captor's systems and his own capabilities. The isolation designed to break spirits instead forged his focus. When the final amber light of each cycle faded to red, he would lie on the bare floor replaying the day's observations, refining strategies, preparing mentally for the arena he knew awaited him. The transparent walls that denied communication became windows to study future opponents and understand the Dominion's methods. The energy blade felt wrong in his hands, too light, too balanced, with a vibration that traveled up his forearm. Armor plates clicked into place around his torso and limbs, covering vitals but leaving joints exposed. The material was thin, designed for mobility rather than protection. Technicians with data pads moved around him, making adjustments without speaking. Their instruments beeped as they scanned the equipment's calibration. They'd categorized him as bipedal class 3, whatever that meant. The designation came with specific gear: energy blade, light armor, no shield, no ranged weapons. The armor's inner layer conformed to his body temperature, but the outer plates felt flimsy against his fingertips. He could dent them with moderate pressure. The energy blade's hilt had unfamiliar grips and controls. A thumb pad controlled intensity. A wrist twist altered blade length. No manual, no instructions. Learn through use or die testing it. Holographic displays flickered to life around the preparation area. Statistics, odds, betting lines. His opponent's profile appeared. A Krell Devastator with 4 combat arms and documented kill counts. The odds against Ethan surviving 3 minutes set at 98.7%. The numbers glowed in alien script, cold and definitive. Other displays showed audience numbers climbing into the billions across Dominion space. His life had become entertainment mathematics. The armor's design prioritized speed and agility. Lightweight composites, minimal coverage, enhanced joint mobility. It suggested they expected him to evade rather than withstand attacks. The energy blade required completely different technique from Earth weapons. No weight in the blade itself, just controlled energy emission. Swing too hard and you overbalanced. Thrust too eagerly and the energy field could destabilize. He practiced basic movements, testing how the blade responded to different grips and angles. Technicians finished their adjustments and stepped back. One made a final notation on his data pad. The equipment wasn't designed for optimal survival. It was calibrated for spectacle. Light armor meant visible damage. Energy weapons meant flashy visual effects. The entire loadout balanced entertainment value against survival probability. They wanted a show, not a quick execution. A low roar began building beyond the preparation area. The sound vibrated through the floor, through his boots, through the armor plates. It wasn't just noise, it was anticipation. Thousands of voices merged into a single hungry frequency. The technicians withdrew without looking back. Doors hissed open ahead, revealing a tunnel leading to blazing light and overwhelming sound. Ethan adjusted his grip on the energy blade. The weapon hummed with contained power. He understood now. The equipment wasn't for his protection. The light armor would show every impact. The energy blade would create dramatic visual trails. Every aspect served the audience's experience first, his survival second. He was entering the arena as entertainment product, not combatant. The collar around his neck vibrated. Not a warning, but a signal. Time to perform. He took a breath, feeling the armor restrict his diaphragm slightly. The energy blade's vibration matched his elevated heart rate. He stepped into the tunnel, the crowd's roar swelling to meet him. The transition was complete. Captive had become performer. Survival had become spectacle. Every movement from now on would be for someone else's enjoyment until he proved otherwise. The light at the tunnel's end wasn't freedom. It was stage lighting. The Krell stood 3 meters tall, its forearms moving with separate purpose. Each hand held a different weapon: energy blade, plasma whip, concussion maul, projectile launcher. The creature's armored plates overlapped like industrial scales, and its movements produced low hydraulic sounds. Holographic odds displays flashed around the arena. 98.7% probability of human termination within 3 minutes. The numbers pulsed in alien script, a countdown to expected failure. Ethan moved left immediately, keeping distance. Head-on engagement meant instant dismemberment. The arena terrain offered some advantage: tall crystalline pillars, elevated platforms, narrow passageways between rock formations. He noted how the Krell's massive frame struggled in tighter spaces, its arms sometimes interfering with each other's movement. The champion relied on overwhelming force rather than precision. The first attack came from the projectile launcher, a volley of energy bolts that scorched the ground where Ethan had stood. He dove behind a pillar, feeling the crystal structure vibrate from impacts. The plasma whip followed, snaking around the pillar's edge with crackling energy. Ethan rolled clear as the whip vaporized a section of flooring. He kept moving, never staying in one position for more than 2 seconds. He studied the Krell's movement patterns. The augmented limbs had impressive strength but limited flexibility at the joints. Each arm moved with slight mechanical hesitation between actions, as if processing separate commands. The creature's visual tracking also showed gaps. It struggled to follow rapid directional changes. Ethan began using the pillars as visual barriers, breaking line of sight repeatedly. The crowd's roaring shifted tone over time. Initial bloodthirsty cheers gave way to murmurs of confusion as minutes passed without a kill. The Krell grew increasingly frustrated, its attacks becoming more aggressive but less accurate. It began smashing pillars indiscriminately, creating debris fields that actually worked to Ethan's advantage. Smaller fragments provided additional cover, while the destruction limited the champion's own mobility. Ethan focused on the arm joints, the points where mechanical augmentation met biological tissue. These areas had less armor protection, likely requiring flexibility for full range of motion. He started baiting attacks, luring the Krell into positions where its weapons created openings. When the concussion maul swung wide, he darted inside its arc and slashed at the elbow joint of the energy blade arm. The strike connected but didn't sever, just enough to produce a spray of hydraulic fluid and reduce that arm's effectiveness. The Krell roared in anger and pain, a sound that shook the arena floor. It became more reckless, charging through obstacles to reach its elusive target. This proved its undoing. Ethan used a partially destroyed platform to gain elevation, then dropped onto the champion's back as it passed beneath. He drove his energy blade into the shoulder joint of the projectile launcher arm, twisting hard. The arm went limp, the weapon clattering to the ground. With 2 arms compromised, the Krell's coordination deteriorated further. The remaining weapons moved without synergy, actually interfering with each other. Ethan continued targeting joints, wrist actuators, elbow servos, shoulder mounts. Each successful strike reduced the champion's combat effectiveness while keeping vital organs untouched. The crowd had gone completely silent, watching the impossible unfold. The final moment came when the Krell overextended a plasma whip attack, tangling the weapon around its own legs. Ethan seized the opportunity, sweeping the creature's remaining support limb before driving his blade through its primary visual sensor cluster. The champion collapsed with a ground-shaking impact, its systems emitting failure sigmas. The arena remained silent for 3 full seconds before erupting in astonished approval. The victory wasn't clean or glorious. It was a systematic dismantling that took 20 minutes of constant movement and precise strikes. Adaptation had defeated engineered, superiority through patience and observation. The silence lasted 3 full seconds. After the Krell collapsed, a void where only the crackle of damaged systems and Ethan's ragged breathing could be heard. Then the arena erupted, not in the bloodthirsty cheers of before, but in a wave of astonished approval that vibrated through the floor plates. Holographic odds displays flickered and reset, recalculating probabilities that no longer made sense. The announcer's voice, usually so controlled, cracked slightly as he declared the human victor. That stumble in delivery said more than any proclamation. Guards approached differently when they came to retrieve him. Their weapons remained holstered, their movements less aggressive. They cleared a path rather than forming a containment perimeter. Medical technicians arrived with advanced equipment, scanning his injuries with focused intensity instead of perfunctory checks. The energy blade wound on his forearm received immediate tissue regeneration treatment. Not just basic sterilization. The difference in care was immediately tangible. Cold efficiency replaced by invested attention. His return to the holding block revealed the shift in status. The transparent cube now featured upgraded environmental controls, adjusting temperature and humidity to optimal human levels. The sleeping surface had been replaced with proper bedding instead of the hard platform. Meals arrived with actual variety, different nutrient combinations, recognizable protein forms, even something resembling earth fruits. The surveillance fields remained, but their constant monitoring felt more analytical than punitive now. Overseers appeared at his cube frequently, their data pads recording everything from muscle recovery rates to neural activity patterns. They discussed his performance in low tones, using terms like specimen viability and entertainment yield. Trainers from other champions watched from the catwalks, their expressions calculating rather than dismissive. The economic equation had changed. He was no longer expendable inventory, but an appreciating asset. Ethan understood the leverage he'd gained. They needed him healthy for future matches. They needed him unpredictable enough to maintain audience interest. His rarity as a human specimen became valuable because he'd proven capable of defying expectations. The Dominion's entertainment economy thrived on novelty, and he represented something entirely new. Betting patterns from his match showed how unexpected outcomes drove higher engagement and revenue. He began testing the new boundaries, requested specific training equipment, asked for nutritional adjustments, demanded access to combat footage of potential opponents. Some requests were granted immediately, others after brief consideration. Each approval reinforced his growing value. The collar around his neck still hummed with contained energy, but its warnings became less frequent, its corrections less severe. Other prisoners watched him differently too. Their glances held new interest, some hopeful, some resentful. The insectoid creature he'd observed months earlier now performed its combat drills with renewed intensity, as if inspired by the possibility of change. The scaled humanoid studied him with clinical interest, perhaps analyzing his techniques. Even the guard's behavior shifted, slightly less rigid, occasionally making eye contact without hostility. Ethan spent hours analyzing the economic reports that flashed on his cube's information display. Betting percentages, audience demographics, sponsorship valuations. He saw how his victory had created market fluctuations across Dominion entertainment sectors. His next match would carry different expectations. Higher viewership, more complex betting options, greater pressure to perform. But also more bargaining power for better conditions, better equipment, better opponents. The transformation was complete. Generic prisoner had become specialized champion. The machinery of control remained in place, but now he had gears he could turn to his advantage. Survival was no longer just about enduring. It was about understanding value and leveraging it strategically. Every aspect of his existence became part of a calculated performance. Each action weighed for both survival potential and entertainment worth. The arena was still a prison, but he'd found the first real tools for shaping his captivity. The gray-skinned trainer moved with six-limbed economy, each arm possessing separate purpose. His eyes held the flat sheen of tempered glass, reflecting light without revealing depth. Kekar didn't introduce himself, simply began adjusting the holographic training modules with precise movements. His voice emerged, graveled by old injuries, each word measured for utility. "Your victory impressed them," he stated without looking at Ethan, "but it relied on opponent error, not your skill." Their first session revealed immediate complications. Other trainers watched from observation platforms, their expressions ranging from curiosity to open hostility. Kekar ignored them, focusing entirely on Ethan's movement patterns. When one trainer objected to equipment allocation, Kekar simply redirected power to their training station without argument. The political tensions remained unspoken but ever present. A secondary battle fought through resource allocation and access privileges. Kekar's training focused on physiological weaknesses across species. He demonstrated pressure points on holographic models, nerve clusters behind arthropod eye stalks, balance disruptors for quadrupedal creatures, respiratory vulnerabilities in gas exchange systems. Each lesson combined anatomical study with practical application. "They will study your techniques," Kekar warned during a combat simulation. "Your adaptability must outpace their analysis." The training facility offered advanced holographic opponents that simulated various species and fighting styles. Kekar programmed increasingly complex scenarios, multiple opponents, environmental hazards, weapon limitations. He forced Ethan to fight left-handed, with compromised vision under different gravitational conditions. The sessions blended physical conditioning with psychological preparation, each drill designed to build neural pathways for crisis response. Between exercises, Kekar explained the economic structures governing the arena. "Matches are scheduled based on audience metrics, not fairness," he stated while reviewing combat footage. "They will give you increasingly dangerous opponents until viewer engagement peaks." He showed how betting patterns influenced opponent selection, how sponsorship deals affected equipment allocations, how media coverage shaped public perception. The brutality was secondary to revenue optimization. Kekar's own experience as a former champion informed every lesson. He understood the Dominion's methods intimately. During rest periods, he described how arenas were engineered for dramatic effect: hidden traps, timed environmental changes, atmospheric adjustments that affected performance. "The Zyre have plans for you," he revealed quietly one session. "Continue winning. The alternatives are unpleasant." Their training incorporated psychological warfare techniques. Kekar taught Ethan to read opponent tells through body language and equipment choices. He demonstrated how to manipulate crowd reactions to unsettle adversaries, how to use arena acoustics to mask movement, how to turn spectator expectations into tactical advantages. Every aspect of combat became multidimensional, extending beyond physical confrontation. Ethan began viewing his captivity through new parameters. Survival wasn't just about winning matches. It was about managing career trajectory within the entertainment economy. He learned to anticipate match scheduling based on viewer metrics, to negotiate for better equipment through demonstrated value, to build audience loyalty through consistent performance. The collar around his neck remained, but his understanding of its purpose had transformed. Kekar's mentorship fundamentally changed Ethan's approach. Where he once focused solely on immediate survival, he now considered long-term strategy. He analyzed opponent footage not just for weaknesses but for entertainment value, understanding that dramatic victories yielded better conditions. The arena became a business operation where he was both product and participant. Brutality balanced against economic calculation. Each training session built toward this dual awareness: how to survive physically while advancing strategically within the system that contained him. The Grand Overseer's hologram appeared without warning, spectral and imposing, its form flickering with data streams. It spoke with metallic finality, outlining the champion's path. 5 escalating trials against former champions culminating in a final confrontation. The prize was freedom, the cost measured in escalating risk. Every aspect was engineered for maximum viewer engagement, each battle designed to push combatants to their absolute limits. The announcement carried no emotion, just cold presentation of terms. Failure meant more than death. It meant complete erasure from Dominion records, memory, and history. No legacy, no memorial, no evidence of existence beyond entertainment value. The path structure ensured only the most dramatic survivors could complete it, those who provided sufficient spectacle while demonstrating unparalleled skill. Each victory would bring better conditions, more advanced equipment, higher status. But each success also raised expectations and danger levels in precise increments. Ethan studied the projected opponent profiles. Each represented a different combat paradigm: psychic warfare, temporal manipulation, biological perfection. The match order followed a calculated escalation curve, designed to maintain viewer interest across the entire progression. Betting markets already showed complex derivative options based on survival probabilities at each stage. The economic machinery was fully engaged, balancing potential champion loss against guaranteed entertainment yield. The psychological manipulation was masterful. Offering freedom created powerful motivation despite astronomical risks. It transformed captives into willing participants in their own potential destruction. The path's design exploited fundamental human hope mechanisms, making the near impossible seem attainable through structured progression. Each victory would feel like a step toward liberation, while actually increasing the Dominion's investment returns. Kekar had warned him about this moment. They offer the prize because few claim it, the mentor had said during their last session. The entertainment value comes from the attempt, not the achievement. The old champion understood the economic calculus. The Dominion gained more from dramatic failures than successful completions. But they also gained from the hope the path generated, the narrative it created across multiple matches. Ethan accepted without hesitation. The alternative was remaining a perpetual performer in their entertainment system, his value eventually diminishing through repetition or injury. The path offered directed purpose rather than endless captivity. It formalized what he'd already become, a professional gladiator with specific objectives and measurable progress. Each battle would now serve a larger goal beyond mere survival. His conditions improved immediately upon acceptance. The living quarters expanded to include training facilities. Nutritional monitoring became more sophisticated, optimizing his physique for upcoming challenges. Equipment technicians arrived with advanced scanning devices, cataloging his physiological responses to different combat scenarios. The investment in his potential success had begun, every resource allocation calculated against expected returns. The path structure revealed the Dominion's true priorities. Matches were scheduled based on viewer metrics and betting volumes, not logical progression. Opponents were selected for entertainment contrast rather than balanced challenge. Environmental conditions would vary dramatically to create additional spectacle factors. Everything served the audience experience first, his survival second. But within those constraints, he now had a framework to operate toward specific ends. Ethan began preparing differently. Each training session focused on the specific opponent types he would face. He studied their combat footage, analyzed their physiological limitations, practiced countermeasures against their signature techniques. The collar around his neck still hummed with contained energy, but its purpose felt different now, less about control, more about monitoring performance metrics for the path's progression. His mindset shifted from captive to career combatant. He started considering sponsorship opportunities, audience engagement strategies, performance longevity. The path provided something captivity had denied, a future timeline with definable milestones. Each battle became a professional engagement rather than a survival test. The transformation was complete. He was no longer fighting against the system, but within its parameters toward a specific objective. The Void Dancer materialized like smoke given purpose, its form shifting between solidity and suggestion. It didn't walk or run, it flowed, a dark liquid movement that defied tracking. Ethan's energy blade passed through its form without resistance, the weapon humming uselessly through empty air. His eyes couldn't focus on the creature properly. It seemed to exist at the edge of perception, always slightly blurred, slightly distorted. Traditional fighting stances felt foolish against something that ignored physics. The arena began filling with water from hidden ports in the walls. Not a flood, but a steady rise that soon reached knee level. The Void Dancer's movements created strange patterns on the water's surface, ripples that moved against the current, concentric circles forming from no visible impact. Ethan watched these anomalies carefully, noting how the water distorted around the creature's true position. The liquid became a truth-telling medium, revealing what eyes alone couldn't perceive. He abandoned direct attacks, instead moving through the water with careful steps. Each of the dancer's movements produced corresponding disturbances on the surface, a slight tension here, an unnatural current there. Ethan began anticipating attacks based on these water patterns rather than visual cues. When the creature phased toward him, the water bulged slightly ahead of its actual position, giving him half a second to evade. The battle became a study in perception management. Ethan closed his eyes at intervals, relying solely on the water's feedback against his legs and the subtle pressure changes in the air. He discovered the dancer's movements followed complex but predictable rhythms. 6 seconds of distortion, followed by 1 second of partial solidity. During those brief windows, the creature became vulnerable to physical impact. He used the environment as both shield and weapon. When the dancer attacked, Ethan would kick water toward its projected position, disrupting its perceptual field momentarily. The splashes revealed clearer outlines like ink dispersing in liquid. He noticed how the creature avoided certain areas where water turbulence was strongest, suggesting its abilities required stable environmental conditions to function optimally. The victory came through environmental manipulation rather than combat skill. Ethan created standing waves by moving in specific patterns, making the water's surface increasingly chaotic. This degraded the dancer's ability to maintain its perceptual distortions. As the water reached chest level, the creature's form flickered between states more rapidly, becoming increasingly visible. In a moment of full solidity, Ethan struck, not at the center mass but at the energy field surrounding it. The blade connected with something tangible for the first time. The void dancer collapsed into the water, its form stabilizing into a physical being of crystalline structure and delicate limbs. The arena drainage systems activated immediately, water swirling down through grates in the floor. Ethan stood breathing heavily, not from exertion but from the mental strain of fighting something that challenged fundamental combat assumptions. His equipment upgrades arrived within hours. The new armor incorporated energy deflection matrices that shimmered along its surface. The helmet included enhanced perceptual filters that could track phase-shifted entities. The victory had demonstrated that some threats required countering perception rather than physical force. He'd expanded his combat repertoire beyond traditional warfare, proving adaptability mattered more than raw power against unconventional opponents. The champion's path had revealed its true nature. Each battle would demand not just strength, but complete paradigm shifts in combat thinking. The stone titan appeared as living geology, its form a mountain given motion. Every step shook the arena floor, sending vibrations through Ethan's boots. The creature stood 4 meters tall, its skin layered mineral plates that reflected energy blasts harmlessly. Ethan's first attacks proved futile. The energy blades sparked against rock-like hide without leaving marks. Each deflection wasted power and created dangerous openings in his defense. The arena design offered strategic possibilities. A central platform stood surrounded by deep pits and unstable terrain. Sections of flooring showed visible stress fractures from previous matches. Ethan began moving along the perimeter, testing which areas yielded under pressure. The Titan followed with ground-shaking steps, its immense weight making the unstable sections groan in protest. This wasn't battle so much as structural testing. Ethan used mobility as his primary weapon. He'd feint toward the center platform, then retreat toward weaker flooring. The Titan's pursuit was relentless but predictable. It always took the most direct path, crushing obstacles rather than navigating around them. This tactical limitation became apparent within minutes. Overwhelming defense created mobility constraints. The creature couldn't adjust quickly to changing terrain conditions. He identified specific fracture lines in the arena floor, areas where previous combat had weakened the substructure. By luring the Titan across these points repeatedly, he accelerated structural fatigue. The mineralized skin that made it impervious to weapons also made it incredibly heavy. Each step toward unstable ground became a calculated risk, for both of them. The critical moment came when a large section of flooring near the central platform collapsed under the Titan's weight. The creature dropped partially through, its lower body trapped in the substructure. It roared in frustration, its massive arms unable to gain leverage. This was the vulnerability Ethan needed. The mineral plating that protected its exterior also limited flexibility at the joints. Ethan moved quickly while the Titan struggled. He targeted the creature's support points, ankle joints, knee actuators, pelvic connections. His energy blade found gaps between mineral plates, striking at the biological tissue beneath. The attacks weren't fatal, but they were cumulative. Each successful strike reduced the Titan's ability to free itself from the structural collapse. The creature's own strength worked against it. Its struggles to break free only caused more flooring to give way. Trapped by its immense weight and limited mobility, it became a stationary target. Ethan systematically disabled its limbs, working with methodical precision. The mineral armor that had seemed impenetrable became a prison, preventing the creature from adapting to its changing circumstances. When the Titan finally collapsed completely, the arena monitors registered biological shutdown. The victory came not from overpowering the creature, but from understanding environmental dynamics better than it did. The Dominion's engineering had created perfect defense but failed to account for terrain interaction. Ethan's new armor arrived with enhanced impact resistance and stability controls. The plates incorporated reactive materials that stiffened upon impact, distributing force more effectively. Footwear gained magnetic adhesion capabilities for better traction on unstable surfaces. Each upgrade addressed specific challenges from the battle, preparing him for increasingly complex environmental conditions. The Stone Titan's defeat proved that sometimes the greatest weapon wasn't strength or speed, but understanding how to make an opponent's advantages work against them. The mental assault arrived first, a pressure behind the eyes that blurred vision and distorted spatial awareness. Ethan's energy blade felt suddenly heavy, his movements sluggish and uncoordinated. The Swarm Queen stood motionless across the arena, her antennae vibrating with psychic energy that washed over him in debilitating waves. Simple combat maneuvers became complex calculations as his neural pathways misfired under the interference. Each step required conscious effort. Each defensive posture felt like moving through dense liquid. Smaller creatures emerged from hidden ports in the arena walls, insectoid drones with sharpened limbs and coordinated movement patterns. They attacked in synchronized waves from multiple directions, their attacks perfectly timed to exploit his disoriented state. The Queen remained stationary, directing her forces through unseen connections while maintaining the psychic onslaught. Ethan found himself defending against threats both physical and neurological, his combat effectiveness deteriorating with each passing moment. He began recognizing patterns within the chaos. The psychic attacks followed rhythmic frequencies that corresponded with the drone movements. During intense coordination periods, the mental pressure increased noticeably. Between attack waves, there were brief lulls where his cognitive functions partially recovered. These patterns became his anchor points, moments of clarity he could use for tactical assessment. His energy blade needed modification to counter the psychic frequency. During a defensive retreat, he adjusted the weapon's resonance settings, creating interference patterns that disrupted the Queen's control momentarily. The drones hesitated for half a second, their coordinated movements faltering. This confirmed his theory. The connection operated on specific frequencies that could be countered with matching energy signatures. The critical vulnerability revealed itself through observation. A crystalline organ at the base of the Queen's skull pulsed with energy, corresponding to her psychic commands. This biological transmitter controlled both the mental attacks and drone coordination. Targeting it required precise timing. The organ was heavily protected during active control periods but became exposed during frequency shifts between commands. Ethan used the arena's environmental features to create temporary barriers against the drone swarms. He collapsed structural elements to channel their approach vectors, reducing the number of simultaneous attacks he needed to counter. This bought precious seconds to study the Queen's patterns more closely. Each defensive action served dual purposes: survival and information gathering. The final approach required perfect synchronization. He waited for a major drone coordination cycle, anticipating the frequency shift that would follow. As the Queen transitioned between command patterns, her protective field around the crystalline organ weakened momentarily. Ethan moved through the drone swarm with focused precision, his modified energy blade set to the exact counter frequency he'd identified. The strike connected during the vulnerability window. The blade's energy resonated with the crystalline structure, causing catastrophic feedback through the psychic link. The Queen's control shattered instantly. Drones froze in place, the mental pressure vanished, and her biological systems went into overload. The victory came through frequency analysis and precise timing rather than brute force. New equipment arrived with neural shielding technology that protected against psychic interference. The helmet incorporated perceptual filters that could detect and counter mental attacks. Focus enhancement systems improved cognitive function under duress. These upgrades acknowledged that some battles were fought as much in the mind as in physical space. The Swarm Queen's defeat proved psychological resilience could be as critical as combat skill when facing unconventional warfare paradigms. The Chronos Spectre moved like time itself had fractured, its form flickering between positions without apparent transition. Ethan's first attack connected solidly, energy blade striking torso plating, only to reverse itself a heartbeat later. The Spectre stood untouched, Ethan's muscles suddenly remembering the strike hadn't occurred. This temporal rewinding created profound disorientation, each successful action erased before achieving results. The psychological toll mounted with every reversal, frustration building alongside physical fatigue. The Spectre utilized time dilation to appear in multiple locations simultaneously. 3 ghost images advanced from different angles while the physical form remained elusive. Ethan's defensive movements became guesswork, his blocks often meeting empty air while attacks came from unexpected directions. The arena's environmental systems showed subtle inconsistencies during these moments. Floating dust particles moving in contradictory patterns, energy fields flickering at wrong intervals. These tiny paradoxes revealed the temporal manipulation's limitations. Ethan began tracking environmental feedback instead of visual cues. He noticed how arena debris settled differently after each rewind, how energy fields left faint afterimages where they shouldn't exist. The temporal manipulation created detectable artifacts in the physical world, microscopic evidence that time had been altered. By focusing on these inconsistencies rather than the Spectre itself, he started predicting rewinds before they occurred. The critical realization came when he observed the Spectre's equipment. A crystalline generator mounted between its shoulder blades pulsed with energy, corresponding to temporal shifts. This external device clearly powered the abilities rather than biological capability. Technological dependency meant vulnerability. The generator required protection during active use but became exposed during frequency transitions between temporal manipulations. Ethan adjusted his combat style to force specific temporal responses. He initiated attacks designed to trigger defensive rewinds, studying the generator's behavior during each cycle. The patterns emerged clearly. The device required 3 seconds to recharge between major temporal manipulations. During these windows, the Spectre's abilities diminished noticeably, and the generator's protective field weakened. The final approach required perfect timing. Ethan feigned a high strike to trigger a rewind response, then immediately changed attack vectors during the recharge period. His energy blade connected with the generator housing at the exact moment its protective field dropped for recalibration. The impact created a feedback cascade through the temporal systems. Energy arced across the Spectre's form as its manipulations collapsed into singularity. The victory came through technological analysis rather than combat superiority. Ethan had defeated temporal manipulation by understanding its mechanical nature and identifying the single point of failure. The Spectre's enhanced abilities depended entirely on external systems that could be exploited through observation and timing. New equipment arrived with chronostabilization, systems that protected against temporal distortions. The armor incorporated sensors that detected temporal anomalies before they affected the wearer. Predictive combat assistance technology provided microsecond warnings of temporal manipulations, allowing for adjusted responses. These upgrades acknowledged that some battles occurred outside conventional timeframes, requiring specialized countermeasures. The Chronos Spectre's defeat demonstrated that technological enhancements created corresponding vulnerabilities. Champions reliant on external systems could be defeated by targeting their dependencies rather than their physical forms. This understanding would prove crucial in upcoming challenges where biological perfection masked technological weakness. The energy blade's hum changed frequency, settling into a lower vibration that matched his pulse rate. The armor plates now conformed to his body like hardened muscle memory, moving with him rather than around him. Each victory brought technological refinements that felt less like upgrades and more like extensions of his own capabilities. The Dominion's technicians arrived after every match with new systems, each modification tailored to his evolving combat style and the specific challenges he'd overcome. Better equipment meant escalating expectations. His improved capabilities guaranteed more dangerous opponents, more complex battle conditions, higher viewer demands. The energy deflection fields incorporated adaptive technology that could recalibrate against different attack types: kinetic, energy, biological, psychic. The systems learned from each encounter, building databases of alien physiological weaknesses and combat patterns. This technological evolution demonstrated the Dominion's increasing investment in his continued survival and entertainment value. The rune-engraved gauntlet represented the most significant addition. It projected concussive force blasts for ranged combat capability, something his initial loadout deliberately omitted. The technicians explained its operation with clinical precision. Palm alignment determined blast pattern, wrist rotation controlled intensity. They emphasized its entertainment applications, dramatic energy discharges, visible impact effects, audience visible power indicators. Every feature served spectator experience as much as combat effectiveness. His armor transitioned from reactive plating to integrated systems. The new exoskeleton provided enhanced strength amplification while maintaining flexibility. Energy lines pulsed along its surface, not just for show but indicating active defense systems. Medical nanites circulated through his bloodstream, accelerating healing between matches. The control collar's restrictions loosened incrementally, allowing greater movement within designated areas. These changes reflected his transformed status from prisoner to investment. The equipment progression mirrored champion development within entertainment economies. Each upgrade balanced survival enhancement against spectacle amplification. Better weapons meant more dramatic battles. Improved armor meant longer, more engaging conflicts. Medical advancements ensured consistent performance across multiple events. The technological evolution served dual masters, his survival needs and audience entertainment demands. Ethan studied each new system with tactical awareness. He tested the energy blade's molecular disruption field against different materials. He practiced with the gauntlet's concussive blasts until he could place them within centimeter precision. The armor's strength amplification required recalibration of his movement patterns to avoid overcompensation. Every upgrade demanded adaptation, each technological advancement requiring mental and physical adjustment. The Dominion's investment was calculated precisely. Better equipment increased production costs but also raised betting volumes and viewer engagement metrics. His matches now commanded premium sponsorship placements and higher advertising rates. The technological evolution wasn't generosity, it was business optimization. They were building their most valuable entertainment asset while ensuring his continued cooperation through improved conditions. His transformation from basic gladiator to specialized champion became physically manifest through his equipment. The systems responded to his neural patterns, adapting to his combat style rather than forcing standardized techniques. Where initially he had to learn weapon systems, now they learned from him. This symbiotic relationship between warrior and technology marked his ascension within the arena's hierarchy. The final upgrades before facing the Voidborn Cerberus represented the pinnacle of this evolution. Sleek matte black exoskeleton with pulsing blue energy lines, enhanced molecular disruption blade, gauntlet with additional energy projectors. Each component addressed specific challenges expected in the final confrontation. The technological journey had transformed him from captive to champion, each piece of equipment representing both greater capability and greater expectation. The Grand Overseer's voice filled the arena. Metallic, unadorned, he announced the final challenge, the Voidborn Cerberus, a creature engineered for a single purpose. No challenger had survived more than 3 minutes. Ethan stood listening, his expression neutral, his mind already shifting into tactical assessment. The words hung in the air like a death sentence delivered without emotion. The Cerberus appeared through a shimmering energy gate, its form materializing with predatory grace. 3 heads moved with independent focus, 6 eyes glowing with cold intelligence. Crimson scales covered a muscular leonine body built for power and speed. Claws extended from paws larger than a human torso, capable of shearing through reinforced armor. The creature's tail lashed the air, a bony club moving with whip-crack force. Arena modifications engaged immediately. The smooth combat floor gave way to multi-leveled rocky terrain. Jagged outcrops rose from the ground, creating elevation changes and narrow passages. Pools of viscous liquid formed in depressions, their surfaces shimmering with unknown properties. Scattered boulders and unstable footing altered the combat dynamics completely. This environment favored neither strength nor speed exclusively. It required adaptation. Betting odds flashed across holographic displays. The numbers heavily favored the Cerberus, with statistical models predicting rapid termination. Highlight reels showed the creature's previous victories, each ending within the promised 3-minute window. The audience's anticipation was palpable, a hungry energy that vibrated through the arena's atmosphere. They expected spectacle, not competition. Ethan studied the creature's movement patterns. The three heads coordinated attacks and defense with flawless synchronization, covering all angles simultaneously. Independent thought processes allowed for complex tactical decisions without communication delay. This wasn't a beast operating on instinct, it was a thinking weapon designed for maximum efficiency. Combat instructor Kekar's final briefing provided the critical insight. The central head controlled cardiovascular function, its neural connections regulating heart activity and metabolic processes. Enhanced metabolism required thermal regulation, resulting in thinner armor plating around the heart chamber. This biological necessity created a strategic weakness, a vulnerability masked by overwhelming offensive capability. Ethan's battle plan formed around this single point of failure. Victory wouldn't come from defeating the creature through conventional means. It required precision targeting of a specific area under heavy protection. The 3-minute survival window became his time frame for achieving the impossible. Every movement needed to serve this ultimate objective. The Cerberus initiated combat with coordinated attacks from multiple vectors. Claws swiped from the left while the tail struck from the right, with the central head tracking Ethan's defensive responses. Energy weapons across its body activated simultaneously, creating overlapping fields of fire. The initial assault demonstrated why previous challengers had fallen so quickly. Overwhelming force applied with intelligent coordination. Ethan utilized the terrain for defensive positioning. Rocky outcrops provided cover against energy attacks, while unstable footing limited the creature's charge capability. The multi-leveled environment allowed for elevation changes that disrupted the Cerberus's targeting systems. Each defensive move served dual purposes: survival and positioning for the eventual strike. The revelation transformed certain death into calculated risk. Where others saw invincibility, Ethan saw engineering compromise. Perfection in combat design had required biological trade-offs. The very enhancements that made the Cerberus formidable also created its vulnerability. This understanding became the foundation of his strategy: exploit necessity, not weakness. The creature's cardiovascular system operated at high capacity to support enhanced metabolic functions. This required constant thermal management, particularly around the heart. Thinner armor plating in that area facilitated heat dissipation, but left the organ partially exposed. Targeting this point required perfect timing and precision, but offered the only viable path to victory. Ethan began the battle with defensive maneuvers, studying the Cerberus's attack patterns and movement limitations. The rocky terrain provided opportunities for tactical positioning, while the creature's size restricted its mobility in confined spaces. Each passing second brought him closer to identifying the exact moment for his strike. The 3-minute countdown had begun, but now it measured opportunity rather than survival time. Rock formations rose like jagged teeth from the transformed arena floor. Ethan moved quickly toward the nearest cluster, placing solid stone between himself and the Cerberus's line of sight. The creature's 3 heads tracked his movement with coordinated precision, but the irregular terrain forced it to divide attention between multiple approaches. This environmental complexity became his first advantage against overwhelming physical superiority. Volcanic vents scattered across the battleground began emitting bursts of superheated steam at irregular intervals. Ethan timed his movements to coincide with these eruptions, using the billowing clouds as temporary visual cover. The steam interfered with thermal tracking systems, causing the Cerberus's targeting to falter momentarily. Each eruption created a 3-second window where the creature's advanced sensors became unreliable, forcing it to rely on basic visual tracking. Pools of viscous liquid created additional tactical opportunities. When Ethan led the Cerberus through these areas, the creature's movement slowed noticeably. Its powerful legs struggled against the dense fluid, reducing its charge capability by nearly 40%. The liquid also affected energy weapon effectiveness. Plasma discharges dissipated more quickly when fired across the liquid surfaces. Their range and intensity diminished by the unusual medium. Ethan employed hit-and-run tactics designed to test the creature's reactions to different environmental stimuli. He'd approach from one direction, trigger a response, then retreat using terrain features for cover. Each engagement provided data on how the 3 heads coordinated under changing conditions. He noted slight delays in decision-making when having to process multiple environmental factors simultaneously. The rocky outcrops served as more than just cover. They became weapons. Ethan lured the Cerberus into narrow passages where its size became a liability. The creature's massive frame scraped against sharp rock edges, damaging its protective scales. When it attempted to smash through obstacles, the resulting debris fields further hampered its movement while creating additional defensive positions. Water pools offered both concealment and tactical advantage. Ethan discovered he could swim beneath the surface, using the murky liquid to mask his approach. The Cerberus showed reluctance to enter deep water, possibly due to its dense muscle mass and heavy armor. This hesitation created safe zones where Ethan could briefly regroup and assess the battle's progression. The environmental mastery demonstrated a fundamental combat principle. Superior strength means little without terrain advantage. Ethan turned the arena's features against their intended purpose, transforming spectacle elements into tactical tools. Each rock formation, steam vent, and liquid pool became part of a calculated strategy to neutralize physical superiority through spatial manipulation. His movements followed precise patterns designed to maximize environmental impact. He'd draw the Cerberus across unstable footing, then use concussive blast to trigger rock slides. He timed engagements to coincide with volcanic vent activity, using the steam to mask his positioning. The creature's frustration grew as its physical advantages were consistently negated by terrain factors beyond its control. The resolution came through accumulated environmental pressure. After 20 minutes of strategic maneuvering, the Cerberus found itself trapped in a narrow canyon with limited mobility. Steam vents erupted on both sides, disrupting its sensory capabilities. Rocky walls prevented full extension of its attack range. The terrain that was meant to create dramatic spectacle had been weaponized against its intended beneficiary. Environmental mastery had proven more valuable than brute force in overcoming physically superior opponents. The energy blade found its mark with precision that felt almost surgical. Ethan had spent 27 minutes maneuvering for this single opening, his movements calculated to create the exact alignment needed. The spot was smaller than his palm, located where the Cerberus's armored plates thinned for thermal regulation. This biological necessity, cooling an enhanced metabolic system, created the only vulnerability in otherwise perfect engineering. The blade's molecular disruption field met resistance, then penetrated with a sharp crack of fracturing material. Plasma bursts erupted around him as the creature's secondary systems responded to the threat. Concussive blasts from the tail weapon slammed into nearby rock formations, sending debris scattering across the battlefield. Ethan maintained focus through the chaos, his body positioned at precisely 37 degrees to the impact point. The angle allowed maximum force transmission, while minimizing exposure to counterattacks. His armor registered multiple near misses, environmental sensors flashing warnings he ignored completely. The central neck area showed subtle pulsation during exertion, a rhythmic expansion and contraction that betrayed cardiovascular activity beneath the armored surface. Each beat indicated blood flow regulation managed by the central head's neural systems. The blade needed to strike during maximum expansion, when the underlying tissues were least protected by overlapping plates. Ethan had timed the creature's exertion cycles carefully, counting heartbeats through visual observation of this external indicator. The penetration required every ounce of strength amplification his armor could provide. Wrist actuators strained as the blade pushed through reinforced biological material. The energy field surrounding the weapon disrupted molecular bonds, creating a clean incision rather than a tearing wound. Entry depth needed to reach exactly 7 centimeters, shallow enough to avoid defensive bone structures, deep enough to reach the primary cardiac chamber. Precision mattered more than force at this critical moment. Cardiovascular systems have specific pressure points where damage causes immediate systemic failure. The blade tip found the left ventricle's outer wall, piercing through myocardial tissue with controlled energy discharge. The strike triggered catastrophic pressure loss throughout the circulatory system. Neural feedback from the central head showed immediate distress signals as oxygenated blood stopped, reaching critical organs. The armor plating around the heart was thinner, specifically for thermal regulation purposes. Enhanced metabolism generated tremendous heat requiring efficient dissipation. This engineering compromise, necessary for the Cerberus's peak performance, became its ultimate weakness. The molecular disruption blade exploited this vulnerability perfectly, bypassing the creature's formidable defenses through understanding rather than overpowering. The collapse was instantaneous and complete. All three heads froze simultaneously, their coordinated movements ceasing as neural commands failed to transmit. The massive body went rigid for 3 full seconds, then dropped with ground-shaking impact. Secondary systems powered down in sequence, energy weapons deactivating as life signs terminated. The victory came not from superior strength but from applied knowledge of biological systems. This kill demonstrated how specialized enhancement creates corresponding vulnerability. Engineering perfection always requires compromises. In this case, thermal management sacrificing protection. Understanding these necessary trade-offs allowed Ethan to defeat a physically superior opponent through strategic targeting rather than direct confrontation. The lesson would prove valuable against future engineered champions, each likely possessing their own necessary weaknesses. The resolution cemented a fundamental combat principle. Biological necessity often trumps engineered superiority. No matter how advanced the enhancements, living systems operate within physical constraints that cannot be completely eliminated. These constraints create patterns and vulnerabilities that can be identified and exploited with careful observation. The Cerberus's defeat proved that even perfect weapons carry the flaws of their biological foundations. Silence fell like a physical weight across the arena. The Cerberus lay motionless, its 3 heads frozen in final surprise. Holographic displays throughout Dominion space flickered and stalled on that impossible image. The undefeated champion defeated. For 3 full seconds, the only sound was the crackle of dying energy fields and Ethan's ragged breathing. Then the betting systems crashed worldwide, algorithms unable to process an outcome with 0 historical precedent. Announcers stumbled over their scripts, their practiced commentary failing. One voice cracked audibly while describing the final strike, the professional detachment crumbling under sheer astonishment. Viewership metrics soared even as the wagering infrastructure collapsed, creating a paradoxical surge of attention amid systemic failure. The Dominion's entertainment economy shuddered with the impact, its foundation suddenly revealed as contingent rather than absolute. Across thousands of worlds, the audience's reaction shifted fundamentally. The bloodthirsty cheers that normally followed victories gave way to something quieter, more thoughtful. Species that had never found common ground stared at their screens with identical expressions of dawning comprehension. The invincible system could be broken. The perfect champion could fall. This realization traveled through the galactic network faster than any official response could contain it. In holding blocks and gladiator quarters, other captives watched with renewed intensity. The insectoid creature Ethan had observed months earlier straightened from its habitual crouch, all 6 limbs extending fully. The scaled humanoid ceased its endless pacing, eyes fixed on the frozen image of the fallen Cerberus. Small gestures passed between prisoners who had never communicated before. A nod, a hand signal, a deliberate meeting of eyes. The psychological barriers designed to prevent collective action began crumbling in that shared moment. Security forces mobilized with urgent efficiency. Guards who had moved with bored precision now hurried along catwalks, weapons held at ready positions. Overseers barked commands into comm systems, their voices tight with uncharacteristic strain. Containment protocols activated automatically, sealing sectors and restricting movement. But the response felt reactionary rather than controlling, an attempt to manage something that had already escaped containment. The arena's control systems flickered unpredictably. Energy fields wavered between intensity levels. Surveillance feeds showed intermittent gaps. Communication channels experienced unusual latency. Technicians worked frantically at their stations, but the malfunction seemed to spread rather than diminish. The perfect machine of Dominion control was experiencing its first genuine stress test, and the results were revealing weaknesses in its architecture. Ethan stood breathing slowly, his energy blade still humming in his hand. He watched how the guards reacted to the system failures, how the overseers struggled to maintain order, how the other prisoners observed everything with new awareness. His personal victory had become something larger without any conscious effort on his part. The collapse of the Cerberus had triggered collateral damage throughout the entertainment empire. This moment transformed individual survival into collective possibility. Where each captive had previously calculated their own chances in isolation, They now saw the potential of coordinated action. The Dominion's power relied on maintaining separation between prisoners, on preventing the realization that their fates were interconnected. That separation had just been bridged by a single impossible victory. The psychological fracture spread faster than security could contain it. Prisoners who had accepted their captivity as permanent now saw alternatives. Guards who had followed procedures without question now hesitated at their posts. The entire elaborate structure of control depended on perceived inevitability, and that perception had just been shattered. Ethan remained standing over the fallen champion, his breathing steadying, his gaze moving across the awakening arena. Ethan stood over the fallen Cerberus, his chest heaving, energy blade still humming in his grip. The arena's acoustics amplified his breathing, each exhale echoing across the silent space. He looked toward the observation deck where the Grand Overseer watched, then raised his voice with deliberate clarity. "I claim my prize." The words carried through the dead air, striking against the hundreds of silent observation panels. Then he continued louder, "I stand not just for myself. I stand for all who have been taken against their will." The declaration landed with physical weight. Audience murmurs ceased completely. Guards along the catwalk shifted their stances, weapons dipping slightly in uncertainty. The statement challenged the fundamental economics of the Dominion's entertainment system, the premise that captives were property to be exploited rather than beings with rights. This wasn't a victor claiming his reward. It was a prisoner redefining the terms of his captivity. His words traveled through the arena's comm systems, reaching holding blocks and gladiator quarters. Captives who had moments before watched in silent awe now stirred in their cells. The insectoid creature pressed all 6 limbs against its transparent wall. The scaled humanoid ceased its pacing, head tilted toward the sound. Small gestures passed between prisoners who had never communicated. A nod, a hand signal, a meeting of eyes. The psychological barriers designed to prevent collective action began dissolving. The moment transformed gladiatorial spectacle into political statement. Where the audience had expected celebration of violence, they received a moral challenge. Where the Dominion had planned to showcase their power, they faced a direct indictment of their economy. Viewers across countless worlds watched not just a combat victory, but a fundamental questioning of the system that produced it. Entertainment value shifted into ethical examination in real time. Overseer Vax Terrell watched from the control center, his expression unreadable but his body language subtly altered. His hands performed a small, deliberate movement that Ethan had learned indicated recalculations. The Overseer's gaze swept across his monitoring stations, taking in the system-wide disruptions. His reaction suggested not anger but reassessment, a professional recognizing that the game's parameters had changed permanently. Throughout the complex, control systems experienced unusual fluctuations. Force fields flickered between intensity levels. Surveillance feeds showed intermittent gaps. Communication channels experienced seconds of complete silence. Technicians worked frantically at their stations, but the malfunction seemed to spread rather than diminish. The flawless machine of Dominion control was faltering under the weight of an unexpected variable. Ethan's personal survival had become movement leadership. His victory provided not just inspiration but concrete opportunity. The system's attention was divided, its resources strained. Other captives recognized this opening immediately. The first force field failed in Sector 7, allowing prisoners to overwhelm the unprepared guards. The rebellion began not as organized revolution, but as cascading system failure met with desperate courage. The declaration redefined value within the Dominion's economy. Where once entertainment meant spectacle and profit, it now carried moral accountability. Viewers who had bet on matches now questioned the system that produced them. Citizens who had enjoyed the violence now saw the coercion behind it. The arena's purpose shifted from diversion to confrontation, its bloody theater becoming a stage for ethical examination. Ethan remained standing at the center, his blade's blue-white glow reflecting in thousands of watching eyes. His statement had achieved what physical victory alone could not. It had created a narrative that challenged the Dominion's control over meaning itself. The entertainment economy still existed, but its foundation had been cracked. From that fracture emerged something new, collective awareness that the system depended on compliance and compliance could be withdrawn. The blade still hummed in Ethan's hand, its energy field casting blue-white light across the silent arena. But its purpose had shifted completely, not just a tool for survival but a symbol of defiance. Around him, other captives began pressing against failing force fields, their silent solidarity louder than any battle cry. Entertainment empires crumble when spectacle becomes consciousness awakening. True strength emerges not from power over others but from the courage to look beyond survival, to redefine the game itself, even when the rules were written to break you.